Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales. I'm your host, Alistair Thorne. Settle in with a cup of tea or perhaps something stronger as we dive into another gripping tale inspired by the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. Today we're unraveling Hercule Poirot and the Dark Manor secrets, a locked-room mystery filled with shadowy estates, cunning suspects, and the brilliant deductions of the world's greatest detective. This one's a long one, perfect for those cozy evenings or long drives. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next adventure. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Is it a rainy London street or a sunny beach somewhere far away? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Shadows. The autumn of 1925 arrived in England like a conspirator soft-footed, cloaked in mist and carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and decay. On the edge of the desolate Yorkshire moors, where the wind combed the heather into restless waves, stood Dark Manor, a house that seemed to have grown out of the rock itself rather than been built upon it. Its silhouette was all jagged angles and watchful gables, the sort of place where ravens nested in the chimneys, and every chimney in turn seemed to exhale a sigh of centuries. The stone was blackened by soot and time, yet the window stall, narrow and latticed, glinted with a perverse clarity as though the house itself refused to blink. Locals swore that on certain nights the panes glowed faintly from within even when no lamps were lit. Lord Archibald Blackwood, 58, silver-haired and possessed of a stare that could freeze brandy in the glass, had inherited the manor along with a fortune forged in colonial railways and whispered about opium concessions in the Far East. He had also inherited the family temperament, proud, secretive, and prone to sudden spectacular quarrels. His first wife, Lady Beatrice, had died a decade earlier in a riding accident on the same Morrison accident that some still called convenient. 3 months ago, to the scandalized delight of Mayfair drawing rooms, Lord Blackwood had married Lady Evelyn, née Carstairs, a widow of 31 whose beauty was of the dangerous raven-wing variety. Her eyes were the green of deep water over slate, and her smile arrived a fraction late, as though she first weighed its cost. Society columns crowed that she had traded a bankrupt viscount for a living earl. Those who knew her better suspected she had traded one cage for another, larger one with gilded bars. The household orbited this uneasy sun like mismatched planets. Into this simmering cauldron arrived, on the 17th of October, a small, impeccably dressed Belgian with a mustache waxed to geometric perfection and eyes the color of wet ash. Hercule Poirot stepped down from the London train at the tiny moorland station precisely at 4:12 p.m., clutching a Morocco leather valise and a letter sealed with the Blackwood crest. The station master, a man who had seen perhaps 3 taxis in his life, goggled at the sight of Poirot's patent leather shoes gleaming against the grime of the platform. "Dark Manor, s'il vous plaît," Poirot said, offering a tip generous enough to purchase the man's silence for a month. The taxi, an ancient Daimler that smelled of damp dog and coal, dust-wheezed its way along a road that twisted like a question mark. As they climbed, the moor unfolded. Mile upon mile of purple heather, broken only by the occasional stand of wind-sculpted rowan. Sheep eyed the car with ancestral suspicion. Once a fox crossed the road, paused, and stared directly at Poirot with amber eyes that seemed to say, "You will regret this." The manor gates appeared without warning, wrought iron, topped with blackened spikes, flanked by stone griffins whose wings had long since eroded into stumps. The drive beyond was unpaved. The Daimler's tires crunched over gravel that sounded to Poirot's sensitive ear like the grinding of teeth. At the porte-cochere, Grimshaw awaited, upright as a coffin lid. "Monsieur Poirot, his lordship is expecting you." His voice was a dry rustle, as though his vocal cords had been starched. Poirot surrendered his hat and cane, noting the butler's hands. liver-spotted, steady, but with a faint tremor when he thought no one observed. Nerves or age? Poirot filed it away. The entrance hall was a cavern of oak and shadows. A fire roared in a grate large enough to roast an ox, yet the air remained chill. Portraits glared down. Blackwood ancestors in ruffs, in armor, in the stiff collars of the Victorian age. A woman in emerald silk had eyes so like Lady Evelyn's that Poirot paused mid-step. "Madame votre ancêtre?" he asked Grimshaw. The butler's lips thinned. "Lady Beatrice, her ladyship's great-aunt, sir. Uncanny, some say." A staircase swept upward in two grand curves, its banister carved with gargoyles that seemed to leer. From somewhere above came the faint rhythmic click, click, click of knitting needles. Grimshaw led Poirot past a suit of armor that rattled faintly as they passed draughts, Poirot decided, though the sound followed them like footsteps. They entered the long gallery, a corridor lined with faded tapestries depicting the Blackwood coat of arms, a sable tower cleft by a crimson lightning bolt. Beneath it the motto in Norman French, "Je garde mes secrets." I keep my secrets. At the far end, double doors opened onto the drawing room, a chamber of crimson damask and gilt. The fire here was smaller, more intimate, yet the shadows clung to the corners like cobwebs. Lord Blackwood rose from a wing chair. He was taller than Poirot expected, with the stooped shoulders of a man who has carried ledgers heavier than rifles. His handshake was firm, but his palm was clammy. "Monsieur Poirot, you honor us." His voice was cultured gravel. "Hastings wrote that you are discreet." "Discretion is the polite word, my lord. Accuracy is the one I prefer." Poirot's eyes flicked over the room's occupants, cataloguing. Lord Blackwood gestured to a chair opposite his own. "Tea, Poirot? Or something stronger, the more air bites." "Tea, merci. Earl Grey, if you please. 2 lumps, no milk." Poirot sat, arranging the creases of his trousers with care. Captain Hastings mentioned concerns. Blackwood's laugh was a bark. "Concerns, yes. 3 letters in a fortnight, each promising that my sins will find me out. The last arrived yesterday." He drew a folded sheet from his waistcoat, expensive paper, black ink, block capitals. "No signature," Blackwood said. "Postmarked York. The others were personal. References to Beatrice's death, to investments that well. Let us say certain ledgers never reached the auditors." Lady Evelyn's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Archibald, must we air this now?" "My dear, if not now, when the coffin lid closes." He turned to Poirot. "I want you to stay the weekend. We have a small house party family, old friends. Observe. If someone here wishes me ill, I would know before the moor swallows another Blackwood." Reginald exhaled smoke. "Father, really. You'll have Poirot thinking we're a pack of ghouls." "Are we not?" Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. She flushed when all eyes turned to her. Colonel Thorpe turned from the window. "Dash it all, Archie, if someone's playing silly buggers with poison pen letters, flush 'em out. I'll stand guard myself." Miss Voss's needles never paused. "Violence is so untidy." Sophie, pouring Poirot's tea, spilled a drop. Sorry, sir." Poirot sipped, eyes half closed. The tea was excellent, first flush Darjeeling, a hint of bergamot. He set the cup down with precision. "Tell me, my lord, the staff how many?" "Grimshaw, Mrs. Hale the cook, Sophie here, and 2 dailies from the village who leave at dusk. The gates are locked at 9. No one in or out without Grimshaw's key." "And the house itself?" 40 rooms, give or take. The east wing is shut up, dry rot. The west wing houses the family, my study." Blackwood hesitated. "Is my sanctuary. Solid oak door, Yale lock, bolts inside. I work there late. No one enters without invitation." Poirot's gaze drifted to the windows. Rain had begun, a soft susurrus against the panes. And the moor? Paths. Secrets. Blackwood's smile was thin. The moor keeps its own counsel. There's a Fallia ruined tower half a mile north. Local legend says a Blackwood bride leapt from it in 1789. They still find her veil snagged on the thorns. Dinner was announced at 8. The dining room was a cathedral of mahogany and candlelight. The table seated 12 but was set for 7. Silver glinted, crystal sang when touched. Poirot found himself between Lady Evelyn and Amelia. Conversation flowed like chilled champagne, effervescent, deceptive. Reginald spoke of Ascot, of a horse that simply must win next spring. Colonel Thorpe regaled with tales of tiger hunts, though his eyes kept straying to the decanter. Miss Voss ate with geometric precision, cutting each piece of pheasant into exact squares. Sophie circled the table like a nervous moon. At one point, Lord Blackwood raised his glass. To old friends and new beginnings. His gaze lingered on his wife. Evelyn's smile was flawless. After port, the ladies withdrew. The men lingered over cigars. Poirot declined. The little gray cells required clarity and slipped away to the library. The room smelled of leather and candle wax. Moonlight striped the floor through half-shut blinds. Poirot ran a gloved finger along the spines. Gibbon, Burke, a first edition of Poe. He paused at a gap where a book had recently been removed. Dust outlined its absence tall, thin, perhaps a ledger. A soft sound fabric brushing wood. Poirot turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Mr. Poirot, sir. His lordship asks that you join him in the study, alone." The study lay at the end of a corridor paneled in dark walnut. The door was ajar, firelight flickering within. Poirot entered. Lord Blackwood stood before a wall safe, its door open. Inside documents, a revolver in a velvet case, a small leather box. He closed the safe, spun the dial. "Forgive the theatrics," he said. "I wanted privacy. This," he tapped the safe, "contains my will. Revised last month. Evelyn gets the bulk. The children, annuities. Thorpe nothing. He'll contest it, of course." "And Miss Voss?" Blackwood's face shuddered. "Clara has been provided for. Loyally." Poirot's eyes strayed to the desk. Blotter, inkstand, a silver letter opener shaped like a dagger. A single sheet of paper lay there, the anonymous letter. Beside it, a fountain pen Mont Blanc, gold nib. The ink was still wet. "You wrote this?" Poirot asked softly. Blackwood laughed, startled. "Good God, no. But someone in this house did. The paper is from my study, the pen mine. They want me to know they can reach me anywhere." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming on the leaded windows like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck 10. Blackwood poured 2 whiskeys. "To your health, Poirot. And to catching the devil before he catches me." They drank. The whiskey was peat and fire. Poirot set his glass down untouched after one sip. "Milord, a question. The revolver in the safe loaded?" "Always. 6 rounds. Family tradition since the Indian Mutiny." Poirot nodded. "And the key to this room?" Blackwood produced a Yale key from his waistcoat. "Only 2. This and Grimshaw's master. The bolts are on the inside. When I work late, I lock myself in. No one disturbs me." He ushered Poirot out, locking the door behind them. The click of the bolt was final as a judge's gavel. In the corridor, Grimshaw waited with a candelabrum. "Your room, sir, west wing, 3rd door." Poirot's chamber was spacious, the bed a 4-poster that could have slept a cricket team. A fire crackled. On the nightstand, a carafe of water, a Bible, and a detail that made Poirot's mustache twitch a single white feather. He picked it up. Goose downy, pristine. From a pillow or a message? Through the window, the moor stretched black and endless. Somewhere out there, the ruined tower stood sentinel. Poirot drew the curtains, but not before noticing a light. Chapter 2. Echoes in the Night. At 11:57 p.m., the study door stood closed, the Yale lock snibbed, the 2 iron bolts shot home from within. Inside, Lord Blackwood sat at his desk beneath the green shade of a banker's lamp. A glass of whiskey half drunk glowed amber. The anonymous letter lay open beside the blotter, its block capitals stark against cream paper. He had been writing in a ledger, pen moving in tight, angry strokes. The revolver from the safe rested within reach, matte steel catching the lamplight like a cat's eye. Outside the door, the corridor was a tunnel of darkness broken only by the faint glow beneath the study threshold. The grandfather clock in the hall had just chimed the 3:15 sonorous notes that seemed to linger in the rafters. Then came the sound. Not a gunshot, something subtler. A soft pop, like a cork eased from a bottle. A second later, the unmistakable slump of a body against leather. The lamp flickered once, as though a draft had passed through the sealed room, then steadied. Silence returned, thicker than before. Upstairs, Hercule Poirot lay rigid in the 4-poster pocket watch ticking on the nightstand. He had heard the pop, faint but unmistakable. He was already swinging his legs to the floor when the second sound came. A woman's scream, raw and tearing, ripping the house open like silk. Sophie Lark burst from the servant's stair, nightgown clutched to her throat, hair wild. The master, oh God, the master! She flew past Poirot's door, bare feet slapping oak, and hammered on the nearest guest room, Reginald's. Doors flew open in a cascade. Reginald appeared first, hair tousled, silk pajamas half-buttoned, eyes bloodshot from brandy. Lady Evelyn followed, a vision in ivory satin, composure cracking only at the edges. Amelia clutched a dressing gown, knuckles white. Colonel Thorpe thundered down the corridor in braces and shirt sleeves, army revolver in hand. "Stand back, damn it!" Miss Voss glided behind, face pale but composed, knitting abandoned somewhere. Grimshaw, candle in hand, brought up the rear, his shadow leaping grotesquely on the walls. They converged on the study door. Sophie was sobbing, pointing. 2 heard the shot, looked through the keyhole, saw him fall. Reginald rattled the handle, locked. He threw his shoulder against the oak. It shuddered but held. Thorpe joined him. 1, 2, heave! And the door splintered at the lock, swinging inward on protesting hinges. The tableau froze them. Lord Blackwood slumped, forward over the desk, right temple against the blotter. A neat black hole above the ear. Blood had soaked the ledger, turning figures to crimson smears. The revolver lay in his lax left hand, finger still curled through the trigger guard. 1 empty cartridge glinted on the rug. The room smelled of gunpowder, whiskey, and something metallic. The windows were latched, curtains undisturbed. The bolts on the inside of the door remained thrown. No other exit, no footprints in the dust on the sill. The fire in the grate had burned low. A single log collapsed with a sigh of sparks. Poirot slipped past the knot of bodies, gloved already. He had paused only to snatch kid gloves from his dresser. "Personne ne touche," his voice cut like a scalpel. "Jap will want the scene pristine." He knelt. Powder burns stippled the wound close range. The gun, Webley Mark 6, 6 chambers, 1 fired. Fingerprints would be the Lord's own. Poirot could see the smudges already. On the blotter, beneath the pooling blood, a single sheet. The handwriting matched samples Poirot had glimpsed earlier, Blackwood's impatient scrawl. Sophie was hysterical. "I couldn't sleep. Heard the clock chime 12, then the shot. Ran straight here, peered through the keyhole, saw him raise the gun, saw the flash." Reginald rounded on her. "You saw him shoot himself?" She nodded, tears streaking soot from the lamps. "Clear as day." Lady Evelyn swayed, Amelia caught her. "He was troubled," Evelyn whispered. "The letters, the debts." Thorpe snorted. Debts don't put a bullet in your brain, madam. Archie was tougher than that. Miss Voss's voice was ice. The room is locked from within. Windows barred. We all heard the bolt earlier. Grimshaw set the candelabrum on a side table, hands trembling now. I locked the front door at 9, chained the gate, no one passed. Poirot straightened, eyes sweeping the room with photographic precision. He noted. He lifted the feather with tweezers from his pocket, sealed it in an envelope. Curieux? Reginald paced. Suicide, then. Father's been brooding for weeks. Amelia shook her head. He was angry tonight, not despairing. Thorpe examined the revolver. Service issue. Mine's a Colt. This is Archie's. Poirot's gaze fixed on the left hand. Milord was right-handed, n'est-ce pas? Yet the gun is in the left. And the angle, he mimed, to hold it thus the wrist must twist unnaturally. He turned to Sophie. You saw him raise the gun to his right temple? She faltered. Two think so. It was dark. The lamp. Poirot's voice softened, deadly. The lamp was green-shaded directly above the desk. The keyhole gives a clear view of the right side of the chair. Describe the motion again. Sophie's stammer worsened. He lifted it like this, she demonstrated, right hand to right temple. Then bang. Poirot smiled without warmth. Yet the wound is left temple, the gun in the left hand. And the flash you saw through a brass keyhole would be muted, yet you claim clarity. One of us, mademoiselle, is mistaken. The room chilled further. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence pressed like a thumb. Grimshaw cleared his throat. The constable is 4 miles off, sir. Telephone lines are downstorm, took them an hour ago. Poirot nodded. Then we preserve the scene. Grimshaw, station yourself here. No one enters alone. The rest return to your rooms. We reconvene at dawn. As they filed out, Poirot lingered, shining his pocket torch over the fireplace. Soot was disturbed high up the chimney, handprints. He sniffed. Gunpowder, yes, but also something acrid, chemical. He closed the splintered door as best he could, wedging a chair beneath the handle. Then in the corridor he paused at each suspect's door, listening. Behind Reginald's, the clink of a decanter. Amelia's, soft weeping. Lady Evelyn's, silence. Thorpe's, pacing. Miss Voss's, the click-click of needles resumed steady as a pulse. Sophie's muffled sobs. Chapter 3, The Web Unravels. The storm had passed, leaving the air rinsed and cold. At 5:47 a.m., a pale seam of light appeared along the horizon, the color of watered milk. In the entrance hall, Hercule Poirot stood immaculate in dove-gray suit and spats, pocket watch open in his palm. The splintered study door had been boarded shut. A constable from the village PC Wilkins, round-faced and awed, stood guard with a notebook and a thermos of tea gone cold. Inspector Japp arrived at 6 sharp, bowler hat dripping, mustache bristling with the injustice of early calls. Poirot, you old bloodhound, locked room, eh? Paper says suicide. Paper is often wrong, mon ami, come. They entered the study together. The body had been removed at first light. Dr. Faraday, the police surgeon, had pronounced death instantaneous, bullet lodged in the brain. Photographs were taken, fingerprints lifted. The revolver now lay in a labeled bag, 1 round fired, 5 remaining. The suicide note had been bagged separately, ink still faintly tacky. Japp sniffed. Smells like a clear case. Debts, threats, bang. Why drag me through the mud? Poirot knelt by the desk, magnifying glass in hand. Because, Japp, the devil is in the left hand. He indicated the faint powder burns. Wound left temple, gun in left hand. Yet Blackwood signed the ledger with his right. See the ink smudges. A right-handed man does not suddenly become ambidextrous for self-destruction. Japp grunted. Staged, then. But the door, bolted inside, windows barred. No trapdoors, no secret panels. I searched till 3. Poirot's torch beam swept the chimney. Soot disturbed. Someone climbed or something was passed through. They moved to the library for interviews. Grimshaw had laid a fire. The room smelled of applewood and apprehension. Poirot arranged 7 chairs in a semicircle, took the center himself, notebook balanced, on knee. Japp leaned against the mantel, arms folded. Lady Evelyn entered first, wrapped in black velvet, eyes red but dry. "Ask what you must, monsieur. I am numb." Poirot's voice was gentle. "Madam, at what hour did you retire?" 11:15. Amelia and I took tea in my sitting room. I read for an hour. Rebecca, ironically, then slept. Alone. "Alone," Poirot repeated. "Yet your husband's glass in the study lipstick, your shade?" She touched her mouth. "I kissed him good night in the corridor. A peck, nothing more." Reginald slouched in next, tie askew, smelling of last night's brandy. "I was in the billiard room till 12:30, potting balls and brooding. Heard the scream, came running." "Your cigarette ends," Poirot said, producing an envelope. 3 in the grate. Filters timed first at 11:20, last at 12:05. You left earlier." Reginald flushed. "Needed air. Walked the terrace, saw nothing." Amelia followed, twisting her engagement ring. "I was in my room. Writing to Edward, father forbade it, but—" She produced a letter, half-finished, dated 11:45. "I heard father lock his study at 11, then nothing till Sophie screamed." Poirot noted the ink-fresh blue-black matching the suicide note. Curieux. Colonel Thorpe marched in like a parade ground. "Whiskey in my room, 1 glass. Heard the shot muffled, thought poachers. Grabbed my revolver, joined the rush." "Your revolver," Poirot said, "is a Colt .38. The murder weapon is a Webley .455, different caliber. Yet both smell of gun oil recently cleaned." Thorpe's jaw tightened. "Habit. Old soldier." Miss Voss entered last of the family, posture rigid. "I knitted in the morning room till midnight. Heard the clock strike, then the shot sharp, not muffled. Went straight to the study." Poirot held up her knitting. "This wool gray, thick. Yet a single white goose feather clings to it. Identical to the one in my room and the study curtain." She did not blink. "The pillows are goose down. Feathers escape." Grimshaw was summoned. "I locked the house at 9, checked windows at 10, retired to my pantry. Heard the shot at 12:02, my clock is accurate. Reached the study with the others." Sophie came last, apron clutched, eyes swollen. "I told you I looked through the keyhole, saw him shoot." Poirot's voice softened to silk over steel. "Describe the desk from the keyhole." She faltered. "The lamp, papers, his hand. Yet the keyhole is low. The desk edge obscures the right hand. You saw the left side of the chair only. How did you see the gun rise to the right temple?" Sophie crumpled. "2 guessed, heard the shot, panicked, ran. Lied to seem useful." Japp exhaled. "Little liar, but murder?" Poirot stood. "We search." They began with the study chimney. Soot yielded a scrap of burnt paper corner of a photograph, a woman's gloved hand. In the safe, the will, as Blackwood described, but a codicil unsigned leaving 10,000 to C.V. Clara Voss. Upstairs, Amelia's room, the half-written letter, but beneath the blotter a second sheet block capitals practiced for the anonymous notes. Ink matched. Reginald's billiard room, a muddy footprint on the base size 10 hobnailed. Reginald wore patent leather. Thorpe's room, the Colt oiled, but 1 round missing from his ammunition box. Miss Voss's desk, a bottle of sedative laudanum half empty, prescription for Lord Blackwood. Grimshaw's pantry, a spare Yale key wrapped in oilcloth hidden behind tea caddies. Sophie's attic, a white feather tucked into her prayer book and a torn theater ticket York, dated yesterday. Poirot gathered them in the hall as the sun finally breached the moor, gilding the gargoyles. Observe, he said, holding aloft the feathers. 3 identical. 1 in my room placed after I arrived. 1 in the study after the murder. 1 on Miss Voss's knitting. A signature, a warning. He turned to Sophie. You were in York yesterday to post the final letter? She nodded, trembling. To whom? 2 don't know. A man in a gray coat. Gave me a shilling. Reginald laughed bitterly. Father's debts caught up. Hired killers? Poirot shook his head. No, the killer is here. The locked room is the puzzle, but the lie is the key. He paced. The shot was not at 12, but earlier 11:57 by my watch. Sophie heard it, ran, then screamed at 12:05 after staging her keyhole story. Why the delay? Japp scratched his head. To establish suicide? Precisely, but the left hand betrays them. Someone entered after the bolt was thrown, shot the Lord, placed the gun, exited, and relocked from outside. Impossible, Thorpe barked. Poirot smiled. Only if one believes in bolts and bars. Tomorrow we test the chimney, the windows, the very walls. Tonight, no one leaves. Chapter 4. Clues and Red Herrings. The search began at 9 sharp, under a sky the color of tarnished pewter. Poirot directed operations like a conductor with a particularly stubborn orchestra. Japp and P.C. Wilkins were his strings, the household unwilling brass. Every room was to be opened, every drawer emptied, every chimney swept. They started in the east wing shut for 20 years, smelling of mouse nests and wet plaster. Dust lay thick as felt. Footprints would show. None did. A grand piano stood shrouded. Poirot lifted the lid and struck middle C. The note rang true, but beneath the strings lay a single brass key, tarnished, labeled in faded ink. Tower. Japp whistled. The ruined folly? Poirot pocketed it. Perhaps our murderer enjoys symbolism. In the attic, trunks yielded moth-eaten ball gowns and a child's slate with chalked words. Father is cruel. Amelia's handwriting, age 10. Downstairs, the billiard room offered more. The muddy footprint on the baize had been clumsily brushed, but fibers clung to a hobnailed boot. In the boot room, Grimshaw's size. The butler, questioned, claimed he had cleaned the terrace at dawn. Mud from the rose beds, sir. Poirot's eyes narrowed. At dawn, yes, but the print was made before the rain stopped at 3 a.m. You walked the terrace in the storm, Grimshaw. Why? The butler's mask slipped a fraction. Checking the shutters, sir. His lordship's orders. Next, the study chimney. A soot-blackened sweeps boy was summoned from the village. He emerged coughing, clutching a twisted length of picture wire and a burnt scrap of velvet ribbon black, embroidered with tiny silver towers. Lady Evelyn identified it. My mourning ribbon from Beatrice's funeral, I thought it lost. Poirot twirled the wire. Strong enough to pull a trigger from a distance, yet thin enough to pass through a keyhole. Interessant. The windows were tested. The bars were iron, mortar deep except one, loosened at the base, paint chipped where a jemmy had worked. From outside, the study window looked onto a narrow gravel path. Footprints, obliterated by rain. But a scrap of tweed caught on a thorn bush matched the elbow of Colonel Thorpe's shooting jacket. Thorpe blustered. I walk the grounds every morning, coincidence. At noon, Poirot gathered them in the long gallery. Sunlight slanted through dusty panes, striping the suspects like prison bars. Observe, he began, laying objects on a velvet cloth. The tower key, the wire, the ribbon, the tweed scrap, the white feathers. Now 4, the latest found tucked into the suit of armor's gauntlet. Someone plants breadcrumbs, Poirot said, but breadcrumbs are for birds, and I am no pigeon. He turned to Miss Voss. The laudanum, how much did his lordship take nightly? 10 drops in water for his nerves. Yet the bottle is half empty since yesterday. Someone helped themselves. Miss Voss paled. I keep it locked. Poirot produced a tiny key from his waistcoat. This fits your desk. Found in Sophie's apron pocket. Sophie gasped. Two found it on the stairs, meant to return it. Reginald laughed harshly. We're all thieves now, are we? Poirot ignored him. The suicide note ink still tacky at 6 a.m. Yet Blackwood died at 11:57. Ink dries in minutes. Someone wrote it after death. He held up the fountain pen from the study. Gold nib scratched. See the burr? It catches on the F in forgive. The note has no such catch, written with a different pen. Amelia's hand flew to her throat. I have a Mont Blanc father gave it to me. Her room yielded the pen, hidden in a jewelry box. The nib was perfect, but beside it lay a second bottle of ink blue-black, identical to the note but with a sediment of gold flecks. The study ink was plain. Someone borrowed your pen, mademoiselle, then returned a substitute. Lunch was a silent affair. Poirot ate nothing, eyes flicking over faces. Lady Evelyn toyed with her food. Reginald drank, claret like water. Afterwards, Japp took Poirot aside. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Enjoyment is when the puzzle fits, Japp. Here, pieces are forced. They searched the west wing. In Thorpe's room, behind a false panel in the wardrobe, lay a leather folio. Share certificates in a defunct Burmese teak company, endorsed to Lord Blackwood, worthless now, but once Thorpe's fortune. A margin note in Thorpe's hand. Payment or ruin. Thorpe, confronted, went scarlet. He promised to buy me out. Reneged. I'd have horsewhipped him if he weren't already dead. In Miss Voss's room, a locked drawer yielded letters, yellowed, tied with faded ribbon. Love letters from a young Archibald Blackwood to my dearest Clara, promising marriage before Beatrice. The last, unsent, duty prevails, forgive me. Miss Voss, dry-eyed, said only, water under the bridge. Grimshaw's pantry offered the master key and a map of the manor's drains annotated in red ink, arrows from the study to the wine cellar. Poirot's mustache bristled. A passage? They followed the map. Behind a rack of 1890 claret, a false wall swung inward on oiled hinges. A narrow tunnel, brick-lined, sloped downward. At the end, a rusted iron ladder ascending into darkness. Japp lit a lantern. The folly? They climbed. The ladder emerged in the ruined tower half a mile away, exactly as the map promised. Wind howled through broken arches, ravens scattered. On the stone floor, fresh cigarette ash and a single hobnail print in bird-lime. Poirot knelt. Size 10. Grimshaw again, or someone wearing his boots. Back at the manor, dusk was falling. Poirot ordered the tunnel sealed, the tower watched. In the drawing room, he addressed them again. We have wires, keys, passages, motives galore. Yet the room was locked, the shot heard inside. The wire could not reach from the chimney too short. The passage ends beneath the study floor, but the floorboards are nailed undisturbed. He paused. Someone wishes us to chase shadows. The real clue is, what is missing? He held up the revolver. 6 chambers, 1 fired. But the bullet? He produced a twisted slug from his pocket, lodged in the brain. Yet the study walls are unmarked. Where is the exit hole? They stared. The study had been searched inch by inch. No bullet hole. Poirot smiled. Exactly, the bullet never left the gun. It was fired into something soft, perhaps a sandbag before the murder, to create the sound. The real shot was silent. Japp gaped. A silencer? In 1925, improvised perhaps. A bottle, a cushion. The pop I heard was the true shot. The bang Sophie heard was recorded? He produced a small cylinder from his pocket wax, grooved. Found in the gramophone in the morning room. A private recording played through the speaking tube that connects to the study. Clever. Reginald swore. Father hated that gramophone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone knew his habits, knew he locked himself in, knew the house's veins. He turned to the suit of armor and knew where to hide the sandbag. With Japp's help, he lifted the visor. Inside the helm, a leather pouch, heavy, stained dark. A bullet hole pierced it, the slug embedded in sand. The room erupted, accusations flew. Poirot raised a hand. Tomorrow we reconstruct, tonight we watch. As they dispersed, he caught Sophie slipping a note into Grimshaw's hand. She saw him watching and fled. Poirot followed at a distance. She led him to the kitchen garden where a figure waited in the shadow stall, cloaked. Before Poirot could close the gap, the figure melted into the night. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. The storm returned at 8, sudden and biblical. Lightning strobed the windows, thunder cracked like artillery. The telephone lines, already down, were now officially dead. Dark Manor was an island. Poirot stood in the entrance hall, pocket torch in hand, watching rain lash the gargoyles. Japp had taken the Daimler to fetch reinforcements. The road was a quagmire. Until dawn, they were 7 suspects, 1 maid, 1 constable, and the little Belgian with the immaculate mustache. Poirot addressed them in the long gallery, candles guttering in the draught. Tonight we reconstruct the impossible. The study will be relocked, the gramophone prepared. Each of you will demonstrate your movements at 11:57 precisely. Reginald snorted. A charade. Charades reveal truth, Poirot replied. Begin. They filed to the study. The door had been repaired with new hinges, the bolts gleamed. Poirot locked it from within, then exited through the splintered frame, sealing it behind him with wax and string. The gramophone cylinder labeled Midnight Chimes in Blackwood's hand was loaded in the morning room. Its speaking tube snaked through the wall into the study. At 11:55, Poirot signaled. Miss Voss started the gramophone. A muffled bang echoed from the study, convincing, but not the pop Poirot remembered. At 11:57, Sophie screamed on cue. They rushed the door, shouldered it open. Inside, the desk lamp glowed, the chair empty, the revolver on the blotter unfired. A sandbag lay beside it, bullet hole fresh. Poirot nodded. The sound was planted, the shot was silent. But how did the killer enter a bolted room? He turned to Grimshaw. Your boots, s'il vous plaît. The butler removed them without protest. The hobnails matched the tower print. Poirot produced a second pair from the boot room, identical size but new, soles unmarked. Whose are these? Silence. Lady Evelyn spoke. Archibald's. He kept spares. Poirot knelt by the fireplace. The chimney is wide enough for a boy, but not a man. Yet soot on the hearth he scraped with a penknife, revealing a thin layer of fresh ash over older. Someone descended after the sweep left. A crash of thunder drowned the gasp. Poirot continued. The wire was a blind. The real method was simpler. The bolt, he pointed to the lower bolt, is shorter than the upper. A thin blade inserted beneath the door can lift it from its socket. I tested with a letter opener. The door appears bolted but is not. He demonstrated. The bolt slid free with a soft click. Thorpe swore. Then anyone could have... Anyone with access to the corridor, Poirot finished. But the killer needed more. They needed the Lord alive after the bolt was thrown to place the gun in the left hand. Amelia wimbled. He was dead when we broke in. Was he? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Dr. Faraday's autopsy time of death between 11:45 and 12:15. The laudanum bottle half empty. 10 drops sedate, 50 kills slowly. Someone dosed his whiskey before he locked the door. Miss Voss's needles abandoned earlier lay on a side table. One was bent, tip blackened. Laudanum on the needle, perhaps, to prick the glass's rim. She met his gaze steadily. I am a governess, not a poisoner. At midnight, the power failed. Candles were lit. Shadows leapt. Poirot ordered pairs. No one alone. Reginald with Thorpe, Evelyn with Amelia, Voss with Sophie, Grimshaw with Wilkins. Poirot patrolled. In the library, he found the suit of armor moved 3 feet left, gauntlet open. Inside, a fresh note, block capitals. The ink was wet. Poirot pocketed it, then heard a scream Sophie from the kitchen. He ran. She stood over a trapdoor in the pantry floor, lantern trembling. It was locked. I came for milk. It opened. The trapdoor led to the wine cellar and the tunnel to the folly, but now a new detail. A rope ladder, freshly oiled, dangling into darkness. At the bottom, a glint, the missing bullet embedded in a beam, ricochet mark fresh. Poirot descended. The tunnel walls were damp, footprints small, barreled toward the manor. Sophie's? Upstairs, chaos. Reginald burst in, face white. Thorpe's gone, slipped his room window open. They searched. Thorpe's room, window unlatched, mud on the sill. Footprints led to the stables, then vanished. A horse was missing. Jap's car was still gone. The telephone dead. The moor a black sea. Poirot gathered them in the hall. The Colonel Fleazor is taken. The tunnel, the tower, the horse all part of the plan, but why? He held up the new note. This ink gold flecks like Amelia's bottle. Someone continues the campaign. Amelia fainted. When revived, she whispered, Edouard, me fiancé, was here yesterday. Father sent him away. He swore revenge. Poirot's mind raced. Langtry solicitor's clerk, access to inks, motive. But how to enter the study? At 2:01 a.m., lightning revealed a figure on the moor-cloaked lantern swinging. Thorpe, or another? Poirot ordered the gates chained. Wilkins fired a flarard, arcing into the storm. The figure vanished. In the drawing room, Poirot confronted Grimshaw alone. The spare Yale key, where is it? Lost, sir. Years ago. Poirot produced it from the tunnel. Found beside the rope ladder, your fingerprints, Grimshaw. You opened the study after the murder to plant the sandbag. The butler's mask cracked. 2 found the door ajar at 12:10, went in, saw the body, panicked, hid the bag to protect the family. Or to protect the killer? Grimshaw sank to a chair. 37 years. His lordship's father ruined mine-forged papers, took the estate. I stayed for revenge, but not murder. I swear. Poirot believed him partly. Then who? Dawn was hours away. The storm raged. Poirot stationed Wilkins at the tunnel, Sophie locked in her room, the others under watch. At 3:17, a new scream Miss Voss from the east wing. They found her in the old nursery, a noose of knitting wool around her neck dangling from a beam. Alive, but barely. On the floor, a confession scrawled in laudanum bottle ink. Poirot cut her down. Her pulse was steady. The noose loose. A performance, he murmured, to end the questions. But her eyes wild, unfocused, told another story. Laudanum overdose or fear. He carried her to a guest room, locked the door, pocketed the key. In the corridor, he found Reginald drunk, brandishing a poker. It's over. Voss did it. Poirot disarmed him gently. No, the wire was too short, the drug too slow, the confession written with the wrong hand. He held up Voss's knitting. She is left-handed. The note is right. Reginald stared. Then who? A crash from the study. The boarded door hung open. Inside, the desk lamp smashed, papers scattered, the revolver gone. Chapter 6. The revelation dawn leaked through the study windows in thin, reluctant blades. The room smelled of cold ash and gun oil. The desk lamp lay shattered, papers were strewn like dead leaves. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, revolver in a silk handkerchief, 6 chambers intact, 5 live rounds, 1 empty, but the empty was new. The brass still bright. Jap had returned at first light, soaked and furious, with 2 sergeants and a dog handler. The moor had yielded nothing. No horse, no Thorpe, no cloak. Only a single set of bare footprints from the chimney to the kitchen garden, then vanishing into mud. Poirot faced the household in the long gallery. Miss Voss sat wrapped in blankets, eyes hollow but lucid. Sophie, nightgown torn, stood between Wilkins and a sergeant, wrists bound with twine. Grimshaw's hands trembled as he poured coffee no one drank. Poirot began without preamble. The murder was simple. The complication was the lie that it was impossible. The killer, Poirot said, entered at 11:43 before the bolt was thrown. Lord Blackwood poured 2 whiskeys his own and a second for his visitor. The visitor waited until he turned to the safe, slipped 50 drops into the glass, then watched him drink. At 11:50, Blackwood locked the door, sat, and within minutes slumped unconscious, alive, but insensible. He turned to Lady Evelyn. You kissed him good night at 11:15, lipstick on the glass. But the level in the decanter dropped 2 inches after you left. Someone refilled it, you madam, with the doctored whiskey. Evelyn's chin lifted. I was in my room? No. Your slippers mud on the soles from the kitchen garden path. You entered through the pantry tunnel at 11:40 wearing Sophie's nightgown over your dress. Sophie lent it willingly. She adored you, saw you as the kind mistress. Sophie sobbed. She said it was a prank on his lordship. I believed her. Poirot continued. At 11:52, you played the gramophone from the morning room tube to the study, the bang. Blackwood, drugged, did not stir. You waited. At 11:57, you entered with the spare Yale key Grimshaw's, stolen earlier. You shot him with the Webley, silenced by the sandbag pressed to his temple. The pop, I heard. You placed the gun in his left hand, knowing it would scream staging. You wrote the suicide note with Amelia's substitute pen, gold-flecked ink. You planted the sandbag in the armor, the feathers everywhere. Then you exited, relocked with the Yale, and returned the key to Grimshaw's pantry. He found it at 12:10, panicked, hid the bag deeper to protect the family name. Grimshaw bowed his head. I thought it suicide. Then saw the left hand, knew it was murder, hid evidence to shield the house. Poirot nodded. Loyalty misplaced. He turned to Miss Voss. Your confession, laudanum, made you pliable. Lady Evelyn dosed your tea, wrote it while you slept, staged the hanging. The noose was wool loose enough to breathe, a distraction. Voss whispered. She promised to fund my retirement if I took the blame. I was desperate. Reginald laughed, bitter. So the merry widow wins the estate. Non, Poirot said softly. The will leaves everything to you, monsieur, if Evelyn predeceases or is convicted of crime. A codicil unsigned, witnessed by Grimshaw, cuts her out entirely. She discovered it yesterday. Panic. Chapter 7. Justice served. The study door stood open for the first time in 48 hours, sunlight pouring across the blood-stained blotter like absolution. Hercule Poirot lingered at the threshold, gloved hands clasped behind his back, watching the last of the evidence being bagged. The revolver, the sandbag, the gramophone cylinder, the bent pallet knife, each item tagged, labeled, and carried out by Japs sergeants in methodical silence. Lady Evelyn Blackwood had been taken at dawn in the Daimler, wrists cuffed, face turned to the window so the Moor could not see her tears. Colonel Thorpe followed in the second car, blustering still, but the jewels in his pocket, Blackwood rubies valued at £30,000, had silenced even his parade ground bark. The Folly Crypt had been a poor hiding place. The dogs found him in minutes. Sophie Lark sat in the kitchen, apron folded neatly on the table, a cup of tea cooling untouched. P.C. Wilkins had uncuffed her. She was witness, not prisoner. I only wanted to help her ladyship, she whispered to the cook, Mrs. Hale, who patted her shoulder with floury hands. I never thought it would come to this. Upstairs, Miss Clara Voss packed a single valise. The unsigned codicil leaving her £10,000 had been validated by Grimshaw's testimony and a thumbprint Blackwood pressed in wax the night he died. She would retire to a cottage in Devon, far from moors and memories. Poirot had shaken her hand at the door. "You chose loyalty over truth, mademoiselle. Next time, choose wisely." Grimshaw stood in the entrance hall, cap in hand, 37 years of service ending with a police pension and a reference Poirot himself had written. "The house will pass to Master Reginald," he said, voice steady for the first time. "I'll see it done proper." Poirot nodded. The butler's secret grudge had died with his master, and some debts are paid in silence. Reginald Blackwood leaned against the newel post, cigarette trembling between his fingers. The estate was his debts, dry rot and all. Amelia's engagement to Edward Langtry had been quietly approved by telegram. The solicitor's clerk would arrive tomorrow to begin untangling the ledgers. Reginald exhaled smoke toward the gargoyles. Father always said the tower would fall. Turns out it was the family. Amelia stood beside him, ring glinting in the sunlight. "We'll open the east wing," she said softly. "Let the air in. No more secrets." Poirot descended the grand staircase for the final time, valise in hand. Jap met him at the door, bowler hat dripping from the morning mist. "Clean wrap-up, Poirot. The yard's grateful. Lady Evelyn's confessed everything. Drug, shot, staging. Thorpe's turned King's evidence for a lighter sentence. 10 years, maybe." Poirot adjusted his hat. "And the manor?" "Reginald's selling the London house to cover debts. Dark Manor stays in the family-listed building, you know. Tourists will come for the ghost stories." Jap chuckled. "You'll be in the guidebook." Poirot's mustache twitched. "I prefer obscurity." The Daimler waited, engine purring. Grimshaw opened the door with a bow. Sophie darted forward, pressing a small parcel into Poirot's hand-brown paper tied with string. "Goose down pillow feathers, sir, for your travels. So you remember us kindly." Poirot tucked it into his coat. "I remember everything, mademoiselle, especially kindness." He climbed in. The car rolled down the gravel drive, past the griffins, past the chained gates now standing open. In the rearview mirror, the manor shrank towers, gargoyles, secrets all dissolving into the heather. Halfway to the station, Poirot opened his notebook one last time. On the final page, in his neat continental hand, he closed the book, slipped it into his valise, and drew out Sophie's parcel. Inside, 6 white feathers tied with a ribbon the color of raven wings. He smiled, tucked one into his buttonhole, and let the wind take the rest as the car crested the moor. At the station, the train waited London-bound, steam curling like incense. Poirot boarded, settled into his compartment, and accepted a cup of tea from the attendant. Outside, the Yorkshire hills rolled away, purple and gold. A porter passed the window, shouting the destination. Poirot raised his cup in silent toast to the receding manor. The whistle blew. The train lurched forward. Dark Manor disappeared behind a bend in the tracks, taking its shadows with it. But in Poirot's pocket, the single white feather remained, a quiet reminder that even the darkest house can be opened by the smallest key. Music. A gentle waltz on solo piano, fading to the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails. And so ends Hercule Poirot and the Dark Manor secrets. If the tale lingered with you, share it with a friend who loves a locked room. Tell me below, what clue should you have caught first? Until the next mystery calls, this is Alasdair Thorne signing off from Mystery Manor Tales. Keep your doors bolted, your wits sharp, and your tea strong. Good day, and good hunting. Chapter 8. The Second Silence. The Daimler had vanished over the moor, yet Hercule Poirot did not board the London train. At the tiny station, he dismissed the porter with a coin and a murmur, then slipped behind the coal shed. A second Quran, unmarked Morris, mud-spattered, waited in the shadow of the water tower. The driver, a young sergeant from Jap's team, touched his cap. "All quiet, sir. No one saw you double back." Poirot nodded. "Good. Drive slowly, we return as ghosts." They approached Dark Manor from the service lane, headlights off, tires crunching frost-rimed gravel. The house loomed black against a sky pricked with early stars. Every window was dark except one, the study, a single lamp glowing like a watchful eye. Poirot entered through the kitchen garden, key still warm in his Palm Grimshaw's spare, returned by accident that morning. The back door opened without a sound. Inside, the air was colder than the grave. The fires had been banked to embers. He moved on cat-soft feet, torch beam hooded with a gloved finger. The long gallery was empty, portraits staring at nothing. Yet on the mantel the evidence cloth lay untouched, except for the revolver. The bag was there, but the Webley was gone. Poirot's mustache bristled. Précisément. He climbed the servant's stair. On the landing, a faint scent lavender water, metallic underneath. Sophie's room was locked. He listened, no breath, no movement. Amelia's door stood ajar. Inside, the bed was made, the engagement ring glinting on the pillow beside a note in her neat hand. Gone to Edward. "Forgive me." Poirot pocketed the note, continued. The study door was closed but unbolted. He eased it open. Reginald Blackwood stood at the desk, back to the door, the missing Webley in his right hand. The lamp cast his shadow huge across the ceiling beams. On the blotter lay the unsigned codicil, now signed in fresh ink, witnessed by a single scrawled G. Reginald spoke without turning. "You always were a nosy little man, Poirot." Poirot stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click. "And you, monsieur, are a poor loser. The estate is yours legally." "Why the gun?" Reginald spun, face livid in the lamplight. "Because Evelyn was the distraction, the letters, the drugs, the jewels, my plan from the start. Thorpe was muscle, Sophie the mouse, Evelyn the fool who thought she'd inherit. I dosed father's whiskey weeks ago, slow poison, untraceable. Last night was meant to be suicide. You ruined it." He leveled the revolver. "One bullet left. Yours." Poirot did not flinch. 5, actually. Jap replaced the rounds with blanks this morning, standard procedure when a weapon vanishes. You fire, the house wakes, and your second murder is witnessed by half the Yorkshire constabulary waiting in the stables. Reginald's hand wavered. "You're bluffing." "Test me." A floorboard creaked behind Poirot. Grimshaw stepped from the shadows, candlestick raised. "Drop it, Master Reginald. 37 years I served. I'll not see you hang for it." Chapter 9. The Third Silence. 3 miles from the station, the sergeant braked hard. A transient oak, lightning split lay across the lane. Poirot stepped out, torch beam cutting the fog. The trunk was fresh cut, sawdust still pale. Sabotage. Behind them, headlights flared. A second car, Black Austin, no plates roared from the mist, blocking retreat. Doors opened. 2 men in oilskins, faces masked with scarves, shotguns leveled. "Out, Belgian! Hands high!" Poirot obeyed, mind racing. The sergeant reached for his whistle too late. A butt stroke felled him. Poirot was bundled into the Austin, blindfolded, wrists bound with binder twine. The car lurched, tires spitting gravel, then onto open moor. 20 minutes of jolting tracks. The engine cut, cold air, peat and heather. Hands hauled him out, down stone steps, the folly. The ruined tower smelled of damp earth and old blood. Blindfold ripped away. Poirot blinked in lantern light. Lord Archibald Blackwood sat on a camp stool, alive, breathing, a livid bruise on his left temple. His shirt was blood-stained, but the wound superficial powder burn, no bullet track. Beside him, Miss Clara Voss, no longer frail, eyes sharp as flint. A Webley, the Webley rested in her lap. Welcome to the crypt, Monsieur Poirot, Blackwood said, voice hoarse but steady. You were meant to leave with the others. Persistent, aren't you? Poirot's gaze swept the chamber. Stone walls, iron ring bolts, a crude operating table fashioned from a door. On it, surgical kit, chloroform bottle, a leather strap. A gramophone. The gramophone stood in the corner, cylinder labeled "Heartbeat Slow." Voss spoke, calm as a schoolmarm. We needed a death that could not be questioned. A locked room, a suicide, a confession. You gave us the stage. We merely changed the script. Poirot tested the twine tight, but not hopeless. You drugged yourself with a paralytic curare derivative, perhaps. Sophie's keyhole view was rehearsed. The pop was a blank cartridge fired into the sandbag. The blood pig from the kitchen warmed in a bladder under your shirt. You slumped, breathed shallowly for 20 minutes, then exited via the chimney flue wide enough for a contortionist, which you were in your music hall days. Blackwood smiled thinly. Clara's idea. She studied anatomy in Vienna before the governess disguise. The suicide note was written weeks ago, ink aged with tea. The left hand? My own mirror practice, Voss continued. Evelyn and Thorpe were pawns. The letters, the jewels, the tunnel theatrics misdirection. Reginald's gambling debts were real, but we funded them to keep him desperate. When you arrested Evelyn, we knew the inquest would clear the estate for sale. Reginald inherits, sells to the syndicatious. The manor becomes a sanatorium. Profit, anonymity, and a lord's ransom in blackmail files hidden in the crypt. She gestured to a wall safe, newly bricked. Politicians, bishops, industrialists, Blackwood's real fortune, Beatrice's accident. My doing, she discovered the files. I loosened the girth. Poirot's voice was silk. And Grimshaw? Drugged in his pantry laudanum in the cocoa, he'll wake believing he helped arrest Reginald. Sophie's on a train to Scotland with a forged reference. Amelia and Langtry will marry quietly, none the wiser. Blackwood stood, swaying slightly lingering paralysis. You, however, are a problem. The world believes you solved the case. Your corpse in the bog tragic accident. Grieving detective overcome by more misstyes the bow. He nodded to the masked men. Weight him with stones. The peat preserves. Poirot's eyes flicked to the gramophone. One detail, my lord. The cylinder heartbeat, slow. You recorded your own pulse, slowed with digitalis to fool Dr. Faraday's stethoscope, but the needle skipped at 11:59 scratch at 42 seconds. I heard it through the speaking tube. The recording was looped. You were already in the flue. Voss's hand tightened on the revolver. Clever. But dead men don't testify. She raised the gun. Poirot smiled. No. But live sergeants do. The crypt door exploded inward. Japmud streaked. Revolver drawn stormed in with 4 constables. The masked men dropped shotguns, hands high. Voss fired once wild, shattering the lantern. Darkness. Then torch beams pinned her like moths. Jap's voice boomed. Drop it, Miss Voss. The Moors surrounded, dogs, rifles, the lot. Blackwood lunged for the surgical kitchloroform rag. Poirot twisted free of the loosened twine, always a slipknot, and drove his elbow into Blackwood's solar plexus. The lord folded, gasping. Voss was cuffed, still spitting defiance. You'll never prove, Jap held up, the wall-safe key found on Blackwood's chain. Already opened, madam. Files photographed. Your Vienna medical license, the curare invoices, Beatrice's real autopsy report, murder, not misadventure. The syndicates wired London, arrests by noon. Blackwood wheezed. The title passes to Amelia, Poirot finished. Reginald will be released. Debts paid from the blackmail restitution. Grimshaw wakes to a clean conscience. Sophie keeps her aunt's cottage paid by the crown as witness protection. Voss laughed, bitter. And the manor? Condemned, Jap said. Structural survey, dry rot, asbestos, unsafe chimneys, demolition next spring. The crypt becomes a museum plaque. Here, justice found the unfindable. They marched the prisoners up the stone steps into dawn. The moor steamed gold. Poirot paused at the folly arch, breathing free air. Jap offered a cigarette. "How'd you know to double back?" Poirot lit it with a flourish. "The white feather in my buttonhole's Sophie's gift. Goose down floats. When the wind took the others, one stuck to Blackwood's coat in the Daimler. Only a man who'd climbed a chimney would carry fresh down." Chapter 10. Dawn of Justice. The folly crypt echoed with the clank of handcuffs and the low growl of police dogs straining at leashes. Hercule Poirot stood at the weathered archway of the ruined tower. Dawn's first light painting his impeccable dove-gray suit in strokes of rose and burnished gold. The air hummed with the scent of wet peat and liberation. Lord Archibald Blackwood, stripped of title, pretense, and power, stumbled up the uneven stone steps flanked by two burly constables whose grips were iron. His face, once a mask of aristocratic command, was ashen and hollowed, the livid bruise on his left temple blooming purple like a fatal flower. Beside him trudged Miss Clara Voss, her angular frame stooped under the weight of exposure, eyes no longer the sharp flint of a governess but the dull coals of defeat. The Webley revolver, that instrument of so many deceptions, lay long confiscated in Jap's evidence bag. Inspector Jap clapped a meaty hand on Poirot's shoulder, his bowler hat askew, pipe clenched triumphantly between tobacco-stained teeth. "Bloody brilliant, old man. The yard's in your debt twice, no, thrice over." Blackwood and Voss, life sentences minimum with hard labor at Wormwood Scrubs. The syndicate? Raids underway in London by tea time. Mayfair clubs, Belgravia townhouses, the lot. Blackmail files incinerated in the crypt furnace, but photographic copies safe in Scotland Yard vaults. Scotland Yard owes you a knighthood, Poirot. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat against the rising moor wind, which carried the faint sweet tang of blooming heather. "Justice is not a debt to be tallied, mon ami. It is a balance restored, precise, unyielding, perfect." The prisoners were loaded into the hulking Black Maria van, its doors slamming shut like the lids of ancient tombs sealing forever. Blackwood paused at the threshold, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Poirot's with the desperation of a cornered wolf. "You ruined everything, Belgian. The manor was to be reborn, a discreet sanatorium for the elite, washing their sins clean in streams of gold. Opium cures, memory erasures, fresh identities. We would have ruled from the shadows." Poirot's voice was velvet draped over tempered steel. "Sins washed require no foundation of corpses, my lord. You built your empire on graves, Beatrice's, the syndicate's victims, now your own. Now, you join them in the earth." Voss, her once rigid posture shattered, spat a glob of defiance onto the gravel. "The little governess triumphs nowhere, Monsieur Poirot. You meddle in matters beyond your gray cells." Poirot executed a slight, elegant bow. "Madam, the governess was always the true teacher of anatomy in Vienna's shadowed halls. You taught the body's secrets, I the mind's deceptions, lesson over." The van rumbled away down the rutted track, swallowed whole by the endless purple heather, its taillights winking out like dying stars. Jap's men fanned out with military precision. One team to dynamite seal the crypt against future fools, another to crate the irrefutable evidence, the curare vials etched with Voss's initials, Beatrice's riding girth sawn clean through with a hacksaw, the gramophone cylinder etched with Blackwood's slowed heartbeat, for swift transport to York Assizes. Back at Dark Manor, the household gathered in the sunlit entrance hall under a sky now of vast, unblemished blue. Grimshaw had lit every grate in the house, Flames crackled merrily, driving the lingering chill before them like vanquished foes. Sophie Lark, her small suitcase abandoned in joyful haste, poured steaming tea with hands as steady as a surgeon's. No stammer, no tears clouding her doe eyes. "I'll stay on if you'll have me, miss. Clean honestly now, no more shadows." Amelia Blackwood enveloped her in a fierce embrace, the engagement ring catching firelight. "The manor's yours as much as mine, Sophie. No more attic drudgery, parlor maid with afternoons free for your books." Reginald Blackwood, uncuffed and blinking in dazed relief, accepted a bone china cup from Grimshaw's tray. Steam curled like question marks. I thought father truly dead. The anonymous letters, he penned them himself to scare me straight from the gaming tables." Grimshaw nodded gravely, his skeletal face softening with rare humanity. "Aye, Master Reginald. And he funded your Monte Carlo debts in secret to keep you pliable under his thumb. But Miss Voss..." She twisted the noose tighter. "Poisoned Lady Beatrice with nightshade in her tonic blackmailed the syndicate into bankrolling the sanatorium scheme. Your father played along at first, thought he controlled the puppet strings." Reginald sank into a velvet wing chair, the invisible weight of years lifting from his shoulders. "Then the estate's truly clean? No phantom debts lurking?" Poirot produced a crisp telegram from his inside pocket, freshly arrived from the village postmaster. "From the Crown prosecution, full restitution decreed. Syndicate assets seized forthwith. Millions. Dark Manor yours, debt-free with 10,000 for repairs. Amelia inherits the title outright. Lady Amelia Blackwood, Baroness of the Moor." Amelia's eyes widened to saucers, a flush blooming on her porcelain cheeks. "But Edward, my dearest Edward." "Approved with honors," Poirot interjected smoothly. "He arrives by noon train, a solicitor now with a impeccably clean ledger courtesy of the king's thanks." The hall erupted in tentative, joyous laughter. Sophie's bright giggle like birdsong, Reginald's relieved bark echoing off the gargoyles. Even Grimshaw permitted a rare, crinkled smile, the lines around his obsidian eyes deepening like kindly ravines. Poirot paced to the foot of the grand staircase, his gloved finger tracing the carved gargoyle banister with reverent precision. "The house breathes freely again, mes amis. East wing flung open to sunlight, secret tunnels bricked eternal, folly tower raised to foundation stones by week's end. No ghosts remain, only echoes of human folly, lessons etched in stone." He turned to face them all, eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. One final revelation for completeness. The white feathers were not from mere pillows, but from Voss's rare moor owl, trained in her Vienna days to carry coded notes up the chimney flue. She released it post-murder, feathers shedding as deliberate signal to Blackwood hiding in the crypt. Sophie gasped, hand to mouth. "The shadowy bird I glimpsed at midnight." "Précisément," Poirot affirmed. "And the bobbing light on the moor, lantern in Morse code, all clear, proceed. Simple yet sublime deception." Jap burst in then, coat flung off, pipe aglow with cherry tobacco. "Train's waiting at the station, Poirot. London beckons, tea at Simpson's on the Strand, my treat. The commissioner insists." Poirot glanced at his gold pocket watch. Precisely 9:47 a.m. "Non, mon ami. First breakfast. English style. Kippers smoked over oak, deviled kidneys in cayenne, towers of buttered toast. The little gray cells demand fuel after such exertions." They dined in the morning room, the oak table groaning under silver domes. Kedgeree fragrant with Madras curry, poached eggs nestling in hollandaise, rashers crisp as autumn leaves. Conversation flowed like the finest claret. No accusations, only blueprints for rebirth. Reginald sketched Ascot syndicates, Legitimate breeding stock. Amelia dreamed of restored rose gardens and village fetes. Grimshaw recited the wine cellar's rebirth. Chateau Lafite '09 uncorked for toasts. Sophie polished silver between bites, her laughter the sweetest. Note: Poirot ate sparingly. A single kipper, egg untouched. His eyes twinkling over porcelain like polished onyx. Excess dulls the mind. Precision sharpens it. At 10:30 sharp, Edward Langtry arrived in a village trap, tall and earnest, briefcase bulging with writs. Amelia flew into his arms across the threshold. The ring passed hands, vows whispered amid cheers. Reginald clapped his future brother-in-law's back. Grimshaw poured champagne despite the hour. Poirot slipped away during the toasts, valise retrieved from the waiting Morris by the porter cochere. Grimshaw stood sentinel, cap doffed. "Safe journey, sir. And the feather, do keep it as token?" Poirot pinned the last pristine white plume to his lapel, where it caught the sun like a Moorish jewel. "It flies onward with me, as does every memory, etched indelible." The Daimler purred to life, crunching down the gravel drive. The wrought iron gates swung wide, no chains, no shadows. The stone griffins bowed noble heads in farewell. Behind, Dark Manor gleamed reborn, every window flung open to the breeze, whitewashing flapping like triumphant flags of purity. Halfway to the station, Poirot tapped the glass. "Sergeant, arrêtez, stop." The car halted smoothly. Poirot alighted, climbed a blooming heather bank with precise steps. Below stretched the Folly Tower, ragged silhouette against the climbing sun. He removed the feather from his lapel, held it aloft. The wind caught it, circling once, twice, then soaring eastward on invisible wings. Au revoir, Dark Manor. Adieu to secrets. The York-London Express pulled in at precisely 11 o'clock, steam curling like celebratory incense. Poirot boarded his reserved first-class compartment, settling with a sigh of exquisite satisfaction. As the wheels turned rhythmic on rails, he opened his Morocco notebook to the ultimate page, final entry in violet ink.